Welcome to Ways to Improve Congregational Giving. I'm Jan Christian. I've served as Congregational Life staff for about 16 months in the Pacific Western region. In addition to serving as primary contact for over 20 of our congregations, my areas of interest are conflict transformation, helping things go right, and stewardship. Before joining staff, I served our congregation in Ventura, California for 13 years. Prior to that, I worked in Arizona's social service and justice systems and taught in the College of Public Programs at Arizona State University. I live in Atascadero with my partner and 2 cats, one of whom has joined us here tonight. Kay?
I'm Kay Kreider, and I've been working with UU congregations for the last 6 years and doing professional stewardship since 2000. Wayne Clark, who wrote Beyond Fundraising and used to be head of Congregational Stewardship Services at the UUA, recruited me to help congregations with funding their missions and visions. And I'm currently with the group Stewardship for Us, which is an outgrowth of Wayne's group after he retired. And we help with annual budget drives, financial feasibility studies, capital campaigns, mission and vision work, strategic planning, and planned giving. So one of my passions is to help our UU congregations build cultures of abundance and generosity so that we can make a difference in our lives and the wider world. And I also teach in the graduate program at the University of Oregon's Business School. We have some opening words for you this evening by Pema Chodron, who is an American Tibetan Buddhist. She is an ordained nun and has written several books. The cultivation of generosity is the beginning of spiritual awakening. Generosity has tremendous force because it arises from an inner quality of letting go. Over just a few basic things that are keys to stewardship success. Some of these items we talked about in our previous webinar last month, and some of them we're going to be talking about tonight. So one of those things is a mission-driven congregation. So having successful stewardship means that you're focused on what you want to accomplish together and that you make a compelling case for that. So for example, talking about how you need to raise salaries or pay for the building isn't as compelling as talking about your areas of ministry, such as worship and music, outreach, community within, the activities you do together, your lifespan, religious education, those types of things. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in the webinar. Leadership commitment, it's important for successful stewardship to have your church leaders be on board with what you'd all like to accomplish together with stewardship. And having trust in financial management, that was one of the things that we talked about in the previous webinar, as well as ease in talking about money. We as UUs are able to talk about a lot of different things. We have a fabulous sexuality curriculum in our whole lives, but oftentimes we find it difficult to talk about money. So when we're having the discussions about money, connecting our money and our values together are an important component for successful discussions and successful stewardship. And having direct and personal conversation is important as well, so that people can share what they want to accomplish together and why it's important to them. And then new membership stewardship is another component that we're going to go over as well this evening. So that this is not the agenda for the entire evening. Some of these components, again, we covered in the last webinar and some we're covering tonight, but these are just some overarching keys to stewardship success. So the agenda that we're talking about specifically this evening is tying the congregational budget to our values, creating opportunities for open discussion about money, building a stewardship ministry team. And for that item, we've got some suggestions for a 3-year culture change in order to get your stewardship ministry team going and give you some year-round stewardship ideas that would be implemented by your stewardship ministry team working in connection with all the other ministries. Broadening the ways and opportunities to give, and then creating the next generation of generous Unitarian Universalists.
So we begin with the meaning of stewardship and how I would define it, which is Stewardship is about how we nurture and share the many gifts in our care. And I think this leads us to reflect on the meaning of our giving and our living. And here are two questions on the screen that spring to life for me when it comes to what I've been given or entrusted with and how I'm living. The first is this one from Parker Palmer. Is the life that I'm living the same as the life that wants to live in me? And the second one, am I as generous as I long to be, comes out of that wonderful hymn of ours, hymn 151. I wish I could give like I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. There are areas in my life where giving and generosity come easily, and other areas, not so much. There are ways that I continue to be stymied in living the life I long to live and giving the way I long to give. For one thing, I would like to be more willing to get out of my comfort zone. So I invite you to think about this question at the bottom of the slide, and I sent it out to you a few days ago as well. What's an area in which you would like to grow your generosity or live differently? Where's a gap in your life when it comes to how you're giving and how you would like to give, or area you'd like to be generous in and that you're not, or how you're living as opposed to how you would like to live? And if you're willing to get out of your comfort zone, if that's what it requires, and write something in the chat, I would invite you to do that. And Jennifer will be monitoring our chat.
Great. Brian says, I would like to live like there is enough.
Nice. I'm going to be talking about that value and knowing when enough is enough. I would too, David. To be able to come from a place of abundance instead of scarcity.
And Nicolene says, less money going just to survival, more money to things I want to grow in the world.
Yeah.
Another contributor says, giving time and attention to environmental issues in our locality, in addition to money already being given. So generosity, as she's pointing out, or he is pointing out, relates to more than money. It's about our time and our attention as well.
Yes, it is. Oh, and there's one of my cats.
Mary says, I too would like to get out of my comfort zone. It really scares me. I would like to live a more active life.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth says, I'd like to be more generous in giving to UUSC or UUCSJ. It's very specific, but I'd like to offer more to social justice.
Mm-hmm.
David says, to give without expectation of results.
Oh, yay. Mm-hmm.
Mark says, I would like to be more generous with the time I have to support those many issues that are important to me. And someone from UUCLB says, supportive of the staff of the church. Excellent.
Yeah, thank you all. Stewardship is a year-round calling to a life of deeper meaning. And we invite you to give people in your congregation, perhaps starting with your leaders, the chance to grapple with these questions. And some of these questions could be used as check-in questions for your board, stewardship committee, committee chairs, leadership councils. We want to also, on this next slide, we talk about tying our values to discussions about money. Here are some of those values, as I would articulate them. Our worth is not tied to how much money we have or don't have. This is countercultural. In a culture that asks us, what's your worth? As if it means the amount of money we have. And it's huge in a culture in which some religious perspectives even equate financial success with moral superiority. The second one, we all have gifts to bring. We all have something to offer. We disrespect people when we make assumptions that they don't have something to give. And we disrespect people by assuming they don't have money to give. This third one, generosity in all its forms, is a religious value. And we know that it leads to a sense of happiness and well-being. And when we talk to about generosity, I, like one of you, talked about, think of it in terms of giving people the benefit of the doubt, being able to forgive people, assuming good intentions. It's not just giving of money. This fourth one, knowing when enough is enough. I love that one of you talked about that. It's critical. And our dominant culture tells us that we are not enough and that we can never have too much. The fifth one, we have great abundance in our congregations. If we share what we have, we will have what we need. It's not a question very often of not having what we need. It's that we're unable to share it and find a way to do that. And this last one is, this is scary stuff. It takes courage to commit to our own growth, to be willing to be uncomfortable and move through that discomfort, or to live in that discomfort with integrity. Helping people live countercultural lives and to reject consumerism is really what we're about. And helping people with very little money, financial resources, understand that they are no less worthy. So Kay mentioned our whole lives, and there is a curricula for congregations to help them talk about money, and it is called the Wisdom Path, and you'll see that link there, and we'll be sending it out. There's also an upcoming webinar about helping congregations de-stress for the holidays, and it includes ideas about taking some of the financial stress out and adding more meaning for our families. Whenever we can do that, I think that's a really positive thing. And there's other ways for you to create your own small group opportunities using a book or other resources, using some of the questions that we posed tonight. And we'll be mentioning some of those books at the end. Or offer a workshop for the congregation on why money can be a taboo topic. And there are lots of questions that you can use from the Wisdom Path without following the exact curricula. But one of the things it does is it gives us a chance to explore some of our early memories about money and emotions associated with it, as well as other ways we can become more healthy when it comes to our relationship with money. So you probably already picked up, it's not a quick fix. Creating culture shifts about money is an adaptive challenge, because a stewardship culture is countercultural. It's a long-term process, and we live in the age of the quick fix. So we're going to give you some technical ideas tonight, but we also want to remind you that what we're after here is really a culture shift. And we need to all take the long-term view. Okay.
All right. Well, we're enjoying the cat. I'm a big cat lover, so I'm happy to have the cat participating in the webinar. So mission and ministry-based budgets are the way that folks get inspired to give. And the focus should be on the 5 ministries, or you can have 6 or 4, depends on how you divide them up. These are just example categories for how you might name your missions, your ministries. Worship and celebration, outreach, enriching our shared lives. Those are the activities that we do together within our congregations. Lifelong spiritual growth, so adult and children and youth, RE, and then supporting our UU movement or connection with our denomination. So these are just examples. These percentages are not meant to be hard and fast or even a mandate for what you should do. This is just an example of how it looks in some congregations. This is not necessarily the best allocation. What works for your congregation might work differently at another congregation in terms of how they decide to allocate their resources. But if you take your entire budget that you have and you divide it into these 5 ministries, everything can fit into that, including all your building expenses and your staff salaries. So why do we have professional staff? It's to help us live out our mission and our values through our ministries. So is it easy to allocate staff time to each of our ministries? Yes, it is. And I have a chart coming up that'll show you how we do that. And what about the building expenses? Yes, it's easy to allocate those as well. So if we look at this chart and the overall budget, and I just picked a round number here of $250,000, but you can do this kind of budget for any size congregation, whether your budget is $850,000 or $50,000, anywhere in between. And we have your 5 columns here: your worship and celebration, your lifelong spiritual growth, your enriching our shared lives or community within, your outreach, and your supporting our UU movement. So you can take all of your staff and divide those into each of those ministries. So your minister is going to work some of the time on worship and celebration. They're going to spend some of their time on the LRE, the lifelong spiritual growth. They're going to spend some of their time on church activities that you do together to enrich your shared lives, some on outreach in the community, and some in supporting our movement and their denominational connection. So you would ask your minister or ministers, for example, to say, if you took 100% of your time and you were going to divide it up percentage-wise, it doesn't have to be exactly to the penny or anything like that. They're not going to be dealing with the numbers. Ask them for the percentages, and then you know how much is being spent on that. That can also apply to your LRE or your DRE or your Minister of Religious Education, whatever their title is. They're likely spending time on more than just the lifelong spiritual growth of your congregation. They probably participate in the community activities that you're doing together as a congregation. They're probably doing some outreach and some denominational connection, and they're probably involved from Story for All Ages and other types of things that they might participate in your worship and celebration. So again, ask them to tell you how much they spend time-wise, percentage-wise of their time on each of your ministries. You can do the same thing for your mortgage. Why do we have a building? What's it for? It's for us to be able to do all these particular things. So people are much more compelled to give to what you're accomplishing in your ministries than they are to say, I'm going to help the church pay the mortgage. Not that that's not a great thing to have that be part of it, but we have our building, we have the utilities, all of those things can be divided up. You can have a miscellaneous category. It could be money that you have for some sort of project or something that's related to your building that's not utility or mortgage, or some other funding of an expense. So I just put that category in there, and then you have your totals. And that way you can represent to your congregation what all your expenses go for. I hear often when I visit congregations, well, 90% of our money goes to staff salaries and the building. But why do you have them? They're doing great work on your worship and celebration, on your lifelong spiritual growth, on enriching your shared lives, on your outreach, and on your supporting your movement through your denominational connection. So all of these expenses, if you will, are going to fund your ministries and your programs. So if you can reframe the issue so that people see the value of what they're giving for in this framework, it helps. I saw a recent annual report from a congregation that their report was focused on each of these 5 ministries, and they had how many people were served in each of these 5 categories and what they did. And it was a really fabulous report. It had a picture, it had some statistics, and they were framing what they're doing together as a congregation within all these 5 ministries. So if we're going to establish a stewardship ministry team at a congregation, if you want to do that at your congregation, Here's some ideas for how to do that. So if you're going to have a year-round stewardship program, what does that mean? A year-round stewardship program does not mean year-round pledging. It's good to be able to offer that option if you have the ability, and you should have the ability to, say, donate on your website at any time and have other ways to donate at any time year-round, but not necessarily having, pledging activities where you're trying to get people to pledge year-round, other than when you're interfacing with your new members. But a year-round stewardship program is looking broader at your stewardship ministry in your congregation. So if you can form a team that is your overarching stewardship ministry team and coordinate the variety of activities that you do to fund your mission and vision at your congregation, ensure that there's no overlap, ensure that the timing is good, and then use your generosity and abundance language all year round. That doesn't mean that you're asking for folks for money all year round, but you are putting a framework around what your activities are at the congregation. And you can infuse it into something with RE, you can infuse it into your worship services, and you can express appreciation all year round for all types of generosity. And so when you're recruiting your team, there are some skills that we suggest would be great that the people on the team would have one or more of these skills. They don't have to have all of these skills. It's a group, and everybody brings their own thing to the group. But someone who's comfortable speaking about generosity and gratitude and gifts. And again, the generosity is not only related to money. It, of course, relates to time and talent. So it's not just about the treasure piece. Committing to a multi-year plan. So we have a sample in here of a 3-year plan that you can use to affect a culture change around stewardship, so that it's not just a term that you associate with the annual budget drive. Stewardship is the overall care and feeding of your congregation and the management of it. It's not just about the money. So if we put the overarching theme of stewardship in each activity, then you can create a culture of abundance and generosity. And again, we have some samples about a different theme for each year coming up. So someone who has the capacity to coordinate with a variety of church programs. So you'd like to coordinate with RE, coordinate with worship and music, coordinate with outreach when you are implementing some of these stewardship activities, so that it's part of each of the ministries of your congregation. And it doesn't mean you have to create new things. You can find out what each of these groups are planning and then infuse your theme into each of those areas of the church. So it doesn't require 20 new things a year. You can figure out, based on your theme, where it might fit in by meeting with each of those programs and figure out where it might fit best. Somebody who's passionate about the mission of the congregation. So focused on the mission rather than focused on the budgetary aspect or the finance. Somebody who has a very positive outlook and is willing to put that abundance frame versus the scarcity frame around your stewardship ministry that you create. And then somebody who has the ability to express appreciation year round. Oftentimes people are so pleased when you let them know that you appreciate what they've been doing. And I know that I could improve in my life in expressing appreciation for all the people that in my life, both in a volunteer and work capacity and a family capacity, that do things. So somebody who can help with expressing that appreciation year round. So for the first year, we have a sample theme of receiving. So the ability to receive is really the first step in the path to generosity. So some of us have an easy time giving things out, but then if we get a compliment, it's difficult to receive, or it's difficult just to receive help, or difficult to receive any kind of generosity that somebody is giving to us. So if we have a focus in the first year of receiving, that can help us along on the overall stewardship ministry path towards generosity and abundance. So just some suggested ideas for year one, where you're creating your stewardship team and your job descriptions for each team member. You're creating a calendar with options for stewardship activities in each program area. and you're developing a covenant between the team and the congregation, as well as the team and the staff and the board. And I believe Jan has a sample of that that she used when she was the minister at Ventura.
I do. And I'm going to send you a copy of this when I send you out the link for the survey. But what I found is that, stewardship committee's work is hard work. And all these feelings that people bring, and their shame and their anger, their sense of scarcity, often get projected onto the stewardship committee in ways that are really not okay in terms of the way we want to be together. So in Ventura, we created a covenant. And when we commissioned our stewardship team, we read this covenant in church. But we talked about, what we know, that the making and honoring of a financial pledge is a requirement of membership, that we each bring different fears, hopes, dreams, and values related to money. And we bring different levels of commitment and financial resources, and that these change over time. That the existence and health of our congregation depends solely on the generosity of our members. Both generosity of time and treasure are necessary, but neither alone are sufficient. We spoke in this covenant of what we hold to be true, that generosity is a core religious value. We need to be able to receive graciously and to give generously in order to fully experience life's gifts. Most of the gifts we have, we did not earn. A realization of this calls us to be grateful and wise stewards. We also held to be true that our congregation plays a unique and precious role in our community, serving as a beacon of liberal religion. So the members of the stewardship committee promised to ask only of others what they themselves were willing to do, to create different ways for people to be able to pledge, to hold the pledge in confidence, unless people wish to have the amount revealed, and to listen to concerns and questions with an open heart and mind. And then we ask members of the congregation to promise to enter into the spirit of stewardship with us and to be willing to grow with us and to grow our generosity in all its forms, to make annual financial pledges in the time frame announced, knowing we would always give at least 4 weeks, and to only communicate concerns about the process in a way that was direct and assumed good faith. And we put at the bottom of this covenant, may we all be open to our own transformation and committed to this congregation's mission and our larger movement. We used a line from a poem we adopted and adapted that said, may we be wise stewards so that what comes to us as seed goes on as blossom, and what comes to us as blossom goes on as fruit. And I really encourage you to work that kind of thing with your stewardship committee to help them also feel safe in this work, and to also help set the expectation for congregational members about how we're going to be with one another during this process.
That's great. Thanks, Jan. The last thing we have on here for year one, and there's lots of different things you can do, is to coordinate with your worship team and your LRE program to infuse the generous receiving theme for year one, if that's what you choose, into a service or an activity. And again, you can have whatever theme that you want for this. This is kind of a logical progression to start with the receiving, but I was just at a congregation who decided to use the what's on the next slide for theme for year two as spiritual vocation as their focus for their stewardship ministry team. So moving on to year two, gifts, call, and spiritual vocation. So working with your membership team to identify the gifts and calling of existing and new members and friends. So that's one of the ways that you can gather information and ask people what is their spiritual vocation that they want to accomplish with this congregation. You can also introduce or fine-tune the program-based budgeting. That's the budgeting that I just talked about a few slides ago, where you're allocating all your staff and your building expenses into your 5 ministries and programs. Coordinating with the worship team and the LRE about spiritual vocation. So having an activity where kids can express what it is that they, what inspires them, what they'd like to do, and adults as well. So you can have that be part of a worship service. And then offering a common read and or a workshop on spirituality and giving. So again, at the end of this webinar, we have a list of some books and also a link to a much longer list of books that you can look through and see if one of those is something that you'd like to do at a congregation, at your congregation. Year 3, giving as the theme. And again, it doesn't have to be just giving money. It's about giving your time or giving your talent. So coordinating with the worship team and the LRE team to infuse a culture of generosity into a service and activity for those 2 large pieces of ministry that happen at your congregation. You can also think about forming or re-energizing your planned giving for a legacy or a sustainability fund. And if you haven't yet heard, the congregation at Shelter Rock has injected a $5 million gift into a new program that the UUA will be launching next spring, sometime before GA, where they're going to offer some amount of a match, not a one-to-one match, but some percentage of a match for congregations who have an active planned giving program. So people are leaving a gift in their estate plans for the congregation. And if you have new gifts coming in for that planned gift, then there will be some opportunity to receive some matching funds from the UUA as part of that. So the overall program, the $5 million, is going to help educate congregations on how to have good planned giving programs, but then some of that money is also designated to do the match. So if you don't have an active planned giving program, or if you want to re-energize it, keep your eyes open for an announcement in the UU World or an announcement on some of the listservs that they have for information about when all the criteria are going to be articulated for that program, so that you can take advantage of what is, in my view, free money from a congregation that has the ability to help jumpstart planned giving in other congregations. You can also, in year 3, update your website to include stewardship language and additional ways to give. Some congregations don't have electronic giving yet on their website, and we'll talk a little bit later about how many people are giving electronically these days and how important that is. You want to make it easy for them to give and not have to drill down 4 web pages before they can get to 4 screens before they can get to your donation page. And then you want to offer opportunities for stewardship education for youth, young adults, and families. So what about giving can you infuse into some sort of activity for all of them? And it can be a multi-generational activity, or it can be a workshop. But again, if you have a theme for your year, and then you have 4 times in the year where you're injecting that theme into the overall life of the congregation and into the 5 ministries, then that can help people change their idea about the culture around what it means to have a stewardship ministry and what it means to be generously receiving, have a spiritual vocation, and give your gifts related to your spiritual vocation, and then create a culture of generosity. So the board support for a stewardship ministry team is really important. So having the stewardship ministry team have a clear charge that can either come from the board, or it's something that a stewardship ministry team can craft and then seek approval from the board is important. So it's helpful for the charge for the stewardship ministry team to know what their focus is, and if they're including a particular amount in what they're doing, For example, if they're supervising the annual budget drive or a fundraiser, what is it that you are trying to fund? And it doesn't mean you have to have a new project that you're doing every single year. You have a lot of outcomes that are coming out as a result of all your 5 ministries. So if you have, how many people have you impacted with your pastoral care program, for example, that's part of your community within, part of your lifespan work that you do together? How many people are impacted by your outreach work that's connected to your congregation? How many people are being served and growing spiritually due to your worship and music? So having some statistics that they can focus on so that people know exactly what it is that their money is doing. And again, we don't always have to focus on outcomes, but in some ways, your outcome focus is a compelling way for people to know exactly the impact that their gifts are having, both in terms of their time and their talent and their treasure. And then giving a time frame for your stewardship ministry team too. It's great to establish a team, but you also want to figure out, is this going to be an ongoing thing? Are you going to try this as an overarching team that you're going to put in place for 3 years or 5 years and then reevaluate and see how you can tweak it going forward? But having board support is essential if the stewardship ministry team is going to be successful. And then having the board give their endorsement to the congregation for your stewardship ministry team is key. Having the minister and the leadership express their support for how important it is to get this going is an important piece of success. And then having your church leaders lead by example. So if they can have some level of participation in helping your stewardship ministry program become launched, then that's fabulous. Having a sermon related to it, having a board member get up and say, this is why we think this is important to the health of the congregation and our continuous creation of a culture around generosity. That's an excellent thing to do if they can give a testimonial, write a newsletter article, any way that they can be supportive so that the church understands that this is an important thing to do.
So here's another way to increase generosity. Give money away. What we know is that generosity begets generosity. And so one way to encourage generosity is to practice it. Mike Doral, in his book, Creating Congregations of Generous People, advises giving away 10% of the operating budget. In Ventura, a congregation of about 230 members, we went from not having a minister's discretionary fund to giving away every offering to the tune of about $40,000 a year. We had been taking in about $16,000 a year that went to the operating budget, but we took much more in when we gave it away, well over twice as much. And many new members mentioned how impressed they were when they saw this practice. Kay, I think you were going to share about in the church in Eugene.
Yes. So when we started giving away our part of our plate, or one Sunday a month is what we do, we give that away. Actually, that raises 4 times more than what comes in the plate on other Sundays. And we know there's a difference. A lot of people are giving electronically or not putting their money in the plate for their pledge. But still, there is a piece of all of us that wants to support our communities. Mm-hmm. And so that increased our overall impact and giving of our congregation and impact on the community when we did that. So again, 4 times higher in terms of the amount that comes in the plate during the year when we are giving that away once a month. And as Jan said, her congregation did that for every Sunday. Some Sundays, right. Some months there's
we gave away the entire plate, but I think a great way to enter into something like this is to do a split plate. And if you did from what your experience was in Eugene, if you did a split plate every Sunday, you would be bringing in more for your operating budget, and you'd be giving some away. So anyway, just the idea that generosity feeds on itself and it begets generosity. This next slide is about the next generation of givers. The best time to learn generosity is when we're young. Many of us have had to work very hard to undo old messages about money and giving in order to become generous as adults. I sure have. And congregations can also model giving for children and youth. And in Ventura, we had a big basket in front, and the children collected the groceries that people brought every Sunday and brought them forward on their way to hear the children's story. As I mentioned, we gave away every plate. Sometimes the recipients were chosen by our youth. Our youth were involved in our homeless persons memorial service and putting together packages for people who attended who were homeless, and in other ways. And I also sent out this question in advance to consider some of the ways that your congregation models giving for your children, or that you might adapt some practices or some ideas that have occurred to you. So if you would put something in the chat there about ways that you're showing your children and youth generosity, we'd like to read those out. And if someone needs a little time to just kind of explain a little bit more what you do or an idea that you have, we can also unmute you if needed to do that.
So Jennifer in Pocatello says that our children took up a donation at the service before they left for RE, just coins, but they gathered quite a bit to give to a local cause that they had chosen themselves. Fabulous. That's a great example. And in UU Ogden, they say our children are the offering stewards and ushers, passing the plate for the congregation each week and bringing it forward for the blessing. That's great. Mary says, our children currently collect the groceries, and we are considering having them sign a children's pledge card and including their time and their talent and their treasure. Great.
Nice, nice.
Live Oak UUC says, our kids are bringing up the canned food offering during the service. That's great. Mm-hmm. So modeling that generosity. Elizabeth says, Beth Banks in Davis, the children in our congregation vote on one cause they would like to support.
Excellent. Yeah.
Parents help to select one nonprofit, and the whole congregation gives the full plate amount on the first Sunday. And they also give to the congregation, to the organization.
I wonder too if anyone has a special offering that kids take up, that you take up in RE. You know, I grew up in a mainline Protestant church, and we always brought money for the offering in religious education. I'd be interested in knowing if people are doing that.
And while you're thinking, or if anyone's getting ready to type for that, we have a few more here. Our children give their time to help people collect supplies at the local food bank. That's from Evergreen UU in Marysville. And we have a monthly designated donation with the plate given to a designated cause. David says he grew up with that, but it seems to be a practice which has died out, referring to Jan's mention of giving during the service. I also grew up in a Protestant church where you definitely brought money and saved some of your allowance to give on Sundays. And Live Oak UUC says we hope to do a neighborhood canned food drive with the RE kids. Excellent.
Excellent. Nice. So I think the important thing here is, in terms of this next generation of givers, to provide opportunities for children to give of their time, talent, and treasure. And I love the idea of having pledge cards and teaching kids early on. The other thing in terms of new givers is that we can be very stuck in our culture sometimes about talking about money, not wanting to be public about what people have given and that kind of thing. And so when we're looking at culture shifts, I think it makes a lot of sense to focus a lot of our attention on new members. And new member orientation is a good way to begin being intentional in setting clear expectations. And also, if pledging is required as for membership, which I think it is in most of our congregations, to obtain a pledge as a part of becoming a member ritual. So that's a good area to start setting the new culture.
And I'll just share a brief story about someone who had joined a congregation and no one had talked to them about guidelines for pledging, and they were giving $250 a year. And then when they had some information based on both the suggested fair share giving guide and also just the average pledge for their congregation, they said, gee, I was a little dismayed that no one had talked to me about that before. And not that everybody is going to have that same reaction, but I think having information so you can make better choices, more informed choices if you have information. So don't be hesitant to talk to your new members about that. That particular member ended up giving $250 a month after they had been given some guidelines, and they were happy to do that.
And our previous webinar gave a lot of the very specific material that can be used to educate current and new members about expectations.
So this next slide illustrates that we've got 3 different areas when we're thinking about what we're going to fund, what we're doing with our congregations. And they come from different pools of money. We have income, and there's still income even when you're retired from your retirement income. And in fact, lots of folks have some required minimum distributions that they have to take once they turn 70 and a half. And then for folks who aren't retired, they have what we more traditionally think as standard income. And so that's usually where the annual financial commitment is coming from to fund the annual budget drive. And then when you're doing savings or assets, that's usually where you're looking at some sort of capital financial commitment where people are digging into that to fund either a building project or something broader than that, because these days we're seeing capital campaigns that not only have some capital improvements for a building, but also are ramping up some programs. But people thinking about the long-term legacy that they're leaving for the building and to ramp up the programs, those are coming from savings or assets. And then, and those are a shorter term gift, usually over 3 years, sometimes as long as 5 years, where you're spreading out your gift over those years in addition to your annual giving. And then giving from your estate, there's a lot of congregations that would like to get an endowment program going or a sustainability fund. And they do that through a planned giving program. And as I just mentioned earlier, again, keep your ears out for the legacy fund matching program that the UUA is going to be launching next year that will allow you to access some funds if you meet their criteria, if you have new planned gifts coming in.
Another possibility are just special fundraisers. And I'm sure that's not news to most of you. You probably do special fundraising, but I think it can be really important when raising money for specific projects that are high priorities and may have been identified by members as such. We did some financial planning in Ventura, and we asked people, what would you be willing to give outside of the operating budget for? And it was a fascinating way to figure out where some top priorities were. And solar panels were one of those areas that a lot of people had said, yes, I would be willing to give money. And we had asked them, would you estimate how much you would be willing to give? So when we started doing our planning for special fundraising, we could fit those into our 5-year plan. We could go with the ones that we know were kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of these are very popular and they're important to the congregation. So perhaps it was an upgrade to the building, a new flooring in the community hall, an assistant minister fund was also one of the ways that we added staff. And so I think the importance in targeted fundraising is that they're intentional, that they're not happening if you do have one time of the year that you're working with your operating budget, that you're not doing this targeted fundraiser at that time, that they are limited special projects. And a really good way to help them be successful is to ask people to provide matching funds for those. And it can really kind of be an invitation to others to do that.
And I have this graphic in here because it looks like a fun thing. This is from Unitarian Church, and they're having their Enchanted Forest theme for their auction that's coming up very soon. And one of the things that I heard recently at a congregation was that, gee, all our other fundraisers are so fun except for our annual budget drive. So don't forget to have some sort of fun activity that's associated with your annual budget drive, whether it's a potluck dinner together, whether it's a dance or something like that, that you can do together and have a fun activity. People said that they're excited to attend all the other fundraisers except for when they're doing the annual budget drive. So think about that when you're planning what you want to do for your annual budget drive, and have some community bonding activity that you can do that will make people associate it with something positive as well. So looking at generational motivation. So there's Blackbaud is one of the entities that does a lot of surveys, and they had their recent report, and I have a link to it at the bottom here. So the link should be live in your slides to click on when you get the PDF, but if not, you can paste that into your browser to look at their report. And they looked at the different generations. And so just to review, you're probably familiar with that, the millennials or Generation Y, they categorize those as 18 to 32-year-olds, Gen X as 33 to 48-year-olds, baby boomers as the 49 to 67, and the seniors as 68 plus. So that's what those 4 categories are, and they relate to the years that you were born. But for their report from that they put together, those were the age categories. So millennials, 57% of millennials want to see the impact of their donation. 40% of the Gen X gave to their places of worship. They didn't have a stat for that for the millennials because there's a lot of people in that age category that aren't necessarily going to church. But 49%, down from 57% of the Gen X, want to see the impact. Baby boomers, 46 gave to their places of worship, and seniors, 50% gave to their places of worship. And this is looking at philanthropy overall and then focusing in on the church piece of it. So social media is an essential piece of cultivating younger donors. And I have another slide, though, that'll let you know that there's still, every group here is very much tied to electronic giving. So think about what this means in terms of these statistics. So when you look at their report, the younger the folks are, the more they're interested in seeing the impact of their donation, whereas the older folks are less concerned about that and less concerned about the outcome and more willing to just step up and support. So you need to keep that in mind when you're thinking about your messaging for your congregations. So here is a stat on some stats on the different generations. The baby boomers were, again, they were, for this report, they said 49 to 67, 43% of all the giving that they surveyed out there, and then 42% of the baby boomers were giving via websites. So again, if you don't have the ability to give on your website yet, or to even pledge on your website, because sometimes you can donate, but you can't do your pledge on your website. That's a good thing to do. You still want to have a personal component to your pledging. If you only do electronic pledging in terms of how someone can fulfill their pledge, then that's not going to be as good as having a personal contact that's associated with that. But you still want to give them that opportunity. For Gen X, the 33 to 48-year-olds for this study, 20% of the total gifts out there came from that generation. 40% of that group is giving via websites. For millennials, the youngest group that they surveyed, and in this group that was the 18 to 32-year-olds, they were 11% of all the giving, and 47% gave via website. And then here's the surprising statistic. They found that seniors had 26% of total giving, and 67% of them were giving via websites. So think about how important it is to offer that e-giving. Some congregations are having even a text-to-give system. We talked about that a little bit in our previous webinar, where you can set it up through Vanco or whatever other service that you have where people can give during the service on their phones, or you can have people in the back that have iPads for people to pledge or give or make their payment on the way out, and then offering the ability for folks to give both directly through their bank accounts and also through a credit card is an important component. All right, so use the chat feature. So
Let's talk. Let's talk.
Any questions? Yeah.
Questions, takeaways, something you learned, something you'd like to hear more about?
Actually, can we have people unmute themselves? I think
yes.
we're good at this point.
That'll be great. Or you can use the chat if you're more comfortable doing that.
This is Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, so there is no electronic giving going on at my congregation. Where does one go to get expertise in how to get that started?
So there's a couple of different things you can do. If you find out about Vanco, so you can Google that or whatever your preferred search is, and there'll be a lot of information on that. There's also
and it's VANCO.
Yes, thank you, Jan. VANCO, and that's the most popular way that churches offer electronic giving. It's just a per transaction fee, so it's unlike credit cards. It's not related to the amount somebody's giving, and so there's not a huge fee if there's a large amount coming in via this method. So there's that. There's also if you you can subscribe to the UU Money listserv, and there's other listservs. If you go to the UUA website and look at all their listservs, there's several you can subscribe to, and a couple of those that specifically have discussions amongst folks that are a part of that listserv. And so you can ask questions once you've looked at Vanco, and you could post a question, for example, that says, I've looked at Vanco, what do other people use? Do they like Vanco better? Or I have a question about how this works. Can you tell me? And then either the person responds via email or offers to have a telephone conversation with you. So it hooks congregations together who already have experience with that. So you can do that. You can also, just do a little searching on the web for various congregations and see how they have set up electronic giving on their website. See which one looks appealing to you. And, if you're using WordPress or, that's a popular one that folks are switching over to, since that's part of the UUA website model, but you don't have to use that. If you see how their feature works through that platform and you like that, you can contact that church's administrator and say, how did you set this up and what's the best way to do that? So does that help you out, Brian?
And I'm wondering if there's anybody on the list right now who's having giving by texting or other ways that might be willing to talk to Brian and be a resource. If there is, speak up. Is that helpful, Brian?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
I have a question in the chat. How do you see Faithify figuring into stewardship and generosity giving? Does it decrease the operating expenses support? We did talk a little bit about Faithify in our previous webinar, I believe, as a possibility of just to get outside funding for things that your congregation is doing. I haven't seen any evidence or any studies related to looking at who gives to Faithify and are they giving less to their congregations. And given the fact that I think generosity begets generosity and people appreciate a lot of different ways to give, I wouldn't expect that that's a problem. There was also, could you differentiate between lifelong spiritual growth and enriching our shared lives? For instance, we have chalice circles, and I would like to put them in, use them in both categories. You know, I think how you create your categories is really up to you, and what you put in that is really up to you. So I would probably put lifelong spiritual growth under enriching our shared lives. I would probably, and in our Ventura budget, what we put under enriching our shared lives was all of our programming. So it would be children's religious education, adult spiritual growth, that kind of thing. Did you have a different answer for that, Kay?
Oh, well, my answer is the same as yours in that it just depends on your congregation. So some people, their lifelong spiritual growth is, you know, they put their adult and children and youth religious education in that category. So that's, you know, it's a more defined piece of it. But as you say, a chalice circle can be, you know, both of those things. It can fit in your spiritual growth section, and it can also enrich your life. So again, you decide what you want to name the pieces of your ministry pie, if you will. And different congregations do it differently. So you can, as long as you're not naming those pieces of the pie, building expenses and utilities and staff salaries, as long as they're related to your mission and your ministries that you're doing, you can arrange it any way that is compelling for your congregation.
There was also one we missed a little earlier. Could you tell us more about the generous receiving? Maybe an example of a worship or an RE activity around generous receiving. Right off the top of my head, let's see. One thing that I think is helpful is just framing it that way. Just to start talking about the ability to receive is one half of generosity. That in itself can be kind of a aha for people. To invite people to talk about their stories about having received and what that's meant to them and their ability to receive, and particularly for those who have struggled with it. I think our children struggle a lot less with that. I think we are taught at some point that being independent is a good thing and is the goal, and that means not receiving and not relying on other people. So, but I also think of children's stories where people ask for help and are able to receive help, and to bring up that question with the children. You know, do you ask for help when you need help? When are you uncomfortable with asking for help? Let's see, we have a few more questions. We just started using a square on our pew envelopes with a direct link to Vanco. Woo-woo! This is from Fairbanks, right? We've only tested it and haven't received money yet. Also, I think I heard you say that Vanco isn't based on a percentage, but I think it is for credit cards, but not for bank accounts.
Yes, sorry.
That's right. It's been fabulous though for giving. Yes, we found that is true as well. And we also talked in our last webinar about credit card giving, that a lot of people want to give by credit card, that sometimes we have some concerns about that, but that's something definitely to look at. Our stewardship chair heard about automatic increases for pledges. Do you know of any congregations that are doing this? Your response to this practice? I've known some congregations that were talking about that. And I don't know specifically of any I could think of off the top of my head that have done that. The way they were going to do that would be sending out letters to people, and when it's time for their pledge, and saying, if we don't hear from you, otherwise we are automatically given, the increase in our dreams, visions, our ability to do things. We're increasing your pledge. And then the default would be people would have to contact them about that. Kay, do you know of some that are doing that?
I know that some congregations do just a little bit scaled back of what you just suggested, which is we're hoping for the 10% increase, and here's your information about what you're giving now, and here's what it will be. But I haven't actually seen them say, if we don't hear back. Right. The ones that I've seen recently are ones where they're actually saying, please confirm. And some of them are even via email. Please confirm that this is what you want to do. So if you are going to do something like that, I just think you need to be very clear with folks, because not everybody will know what that is. And you don't want to get into the situation where somebody doesn't understand, especially if it's an electronic transaction. If they haven't given explicit authorization for you to take more, then I think that you just want to be careful. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. I think getting a confirmation is good.
Kay, what do you think about some of the moves to like 2-year pledging and asking people, to make do 2-year pledges in advance with an increase in that second year built in?
I think when there's an increase in the second year, I think that can be great. I think that if you just have an automatic system where people renew without having the opportunity to see what it is what you've been accomplishing and what you want to accomplish together, then that can be difficult financially for the congregation. But I think that if you have something built in like that, then I think that would be fine.
Mary said, we've learned that we are probably moving too fast toward the giving model. We're not sure which of the 3 years we're actually in. We're doing some things from each year for 2017, 18. Any advice? Go for it. I mean, these are just ideas. And I think some of the wisdom in it is that when we are working towards changing stewardship culture, that we're talking about the ability to receive, we're talking about the gifts that we have and our call to generosity, and then we're talking about giving in all of its forms. So there's no one way to do that. Would you agree, Kay?
Right. No, I think that, one size doesn't fit all. Again, I just was at a congregation that really was compelled, and it went with something else they're already planning for this year, is to focus on the spiritual vocation aspect of it. So
yes.
So that's
that could be done at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's nice to have a focus for the year so that, it creates the frame around everything that you're doing.
Yep. This says Anchorage is doing the scan codes. We used to collect the baskets and take them to the back office for counting. Our past minister began having them taken to the front where she would thank people for their generosity. I think that's nice to lift those up. Somebody said, where can we find information on giving by text?
So Vanco has one of the options for that, and then if you search online text to give, that's one of the ways that you can do it. The previous webinar that we did last month talked about texting, so you can, if you wanted to listen to that online, you can access that webinar, and it talks about a couple of different ways to do that.
It says we're considering providing slips at the benches, chairs that people can use to indicate they're doing electronic giving so they have something to put into the basket each week. That's a good thing, some symbol of that. I used to encourage people just, if they had $1, put it in as a symbol of all that they receive and all that they give. In gratitude for what they receive and as a symbol of what they give. I think that's another way to articulate things around an offering, is that we do our giving out of also a gratitude of all that we receive in life. And that gets to that previous question. Brian said, automatic increases really feel risky. I would be angered by it. I agree that it would need to be done in a very careful way. And maybe one of the ways is to put on a card, yes, I will increase my giving by 10%. No, I will stay the same. Some kind of option like that. But I think you have to be very careful about that, or it can feel tricky, I think. And our stewardship theme last year was based on the book Stone Soup. It was awesome and emphasized the receiving aspect. Absolutely. And abundance, right? And scarcity. I love that story. I thought about doing it in the park sometime in our town that never had money to do anything for people who are homeless. This is from Las Vegas. Yay, Las Vegas. This has been a great webinar. We will be looking into getting children involved. What we are doing different this year is educating the congregation about the financial history of the congregation over a period of 3 months leading up to the celebration Sunday in January. That way the members know where their money comes from and is used. Excellent. How can we access the previous webinar? This one has been great. Thanks. It is archived in the Pacific Western region's archives of webinars, and I can send you out that link so that you'll know directly where to go on that. I'm going to make a note of that. It was geared to small congregations, but I think a lot of it applies to thanks very much, Jen and Kay. And I think we're at our time. We've got 1 minute left. Thank you. Great webinar. Thank you all. We were just so pleased to see so many people signing up tonight. And I think we have some closing words for us, don't we?
We do, and these will come around on the slides. We have some possible common reads, and these are all active links that'll take you to where you can buy that or read more about these books. And the online resources, again, the first one is that listserv. So Brian, when you were asking about how to get more information on Vanco, you can see there'll be some lists that are related to
Excellent.
Money. So here's some closing words that Jan is going to...
In the words of Parker Palmer, a leader is someone with the power to project either shadow or light onto some part of the world and onto the lives of the people who dwell there. Together, let us lead our congregations into abundance. And may you feel yourself truly blessed with abundance. Thanks, everybody. Good night.